At one time or another, we have all probably experienced being asked to go somewhere we've never been before, but we're not given any directions on how to get there. Back in the day, before phones, Google Maps, and computers, we would pull out those big old road maps or atlases and look at what roads would take you where you would like to go or were being asked to go. Or you would call the person and they would give you landmarks to help you, like turn left at the gas station, turn right at Dairy Delight. Well, I remember one time Scott and I were living in Indianapolis and I had an appointment after work to our new dentist. I evidently had prepared directions to get there from work, but when I left, I had no idea how to get home. I really had no tools to figure this out. Back then, phones were just your basic flip phones for making calls and not getting directions like today. I evidently didn't have the big old map in my car either, so I had to call Scott on the phone and tell him where I was, and he had to look it up, probably on a map, because computers were so slow then, the connections were dial-up. Well, he stayed with me on the phone, leading me intersection by intersection until I was familiar with the territory enough to get home. We had just had our first cell phones while we lived there. I don't know what I would have done without it, and being able to communicate with Scott, who could guide me home. And if I thought I was in a predicament, well, Abram's was way scarier. God had told him to leave Ur of the Chaldeans, the place he had grown up, and instructed him to travel to a new land, Canaan. What we are not told in this particular scripture is that he traveled by foot and stopped at Haran first. This was about a 600-mile trip with no paved roads, no maps, no phones, no GPS. Can you imagine how exhausting that trip must have been? What did they pack with them? Well, a later verse says he took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, because his father, Lot's father, Abram's brother, had died, and all of his wealth, which included his livestock and servants. Where did they stay along the way? What did they eat? So many unknowns. But Haran was not the destination. They still had another 400 miles to go to get to the land God told them to go, and made them these 3 promises. 1, I will make you a great nation. 2, I will make you famous and a blessing to others. And 3, all the families of the earth will be blessed through you. This is really a lot to get our minds around. This is the first recorded time God spoke to anyone besides Noah. Can you imagine how you would have responded? You're 75 years old, being asked to leave everything you've ever known and go to a place far, far away and load up all you have. How would you have responded? This is a lot of what ifs and uncertainty. And I don't know about you, but I do not like what ifs and uncertainty. I like to have a plan in everything I do, but especially when I'm traveling. I want to know where I'm going, the purpose of the trip, what I should expect when I get there and on the way, and what I should bring with me and how long I'll be gone. Abram had none of that, but we do know how he responded. Scripture says he went as the Lord directed him. Abram didn't get all his questions answered before he set off in obedience to God. At this point in Scripture, we don't know a lot about Abram's character, but it certainly seems he trusts God despite growing up surrounded in a pagan culture. What a picture for us to step out in faith and obedience when we don't have all the answers or even a clear idea of where we're headed. All we know is that God is calling us to go. And this begs a few questions in my mind. Number 1, can I hear God if he speaks to me like Abraham did? And if not, why not? And what can I do about that to make sure I can? And 2, if I hear God and he tells me to do something, even if it seems really scary and far-reaching, will I trust him? And will I do it when I don't have all the answers? Here's the thing. We don't have all the answers in our faith walk, but God has all the answers. And he is worthy of our trust. What is holding you back from doing what God has called you to do? Do like Abram, who later God called Abraham, and as Timothy exhorts, and bear your share of hardship for the gospel with the strength that comes from God. Abraham certainly had his share of hardships, but he ultimately did not rely on himself for this unknown mission and calling, but the one who called him. All God was asking of Abraham was his trust and obedience, and that is all God is asking of us. Can you imagine if Abraham said no? How would things have turned out? Abraham did not rely on his understanding, but on the one who plotted out his steps. And we can do the same thing. Not in our strength, but God's. He is our person we call up. He is our map or GPS that we turn to guide our steps when things are uncertain. He will guide our entire life's path if we let him, which will eventually lead us home to him. But will we listen to him? Will we trust and obey and go where and when he calls us to go? Abraham's trust and obedience changed everything, and he became the father of faith. Imagine what God will do with your trust and obedience.